The big truck hummed a low, sleepy song as Connor drove through the endless night. Miles and miles had blurred into one long stretch of black road, broken only by the thin line of white paint down the middle. It was deep into his night shift, the kind of hour when the world felt like it had gone to sleep, leaving only him and his roaring machine awake. The only light inside the cab came from the soft green glow of his dashboard dials, numbers and symbols that kept him company. They were his steady friends, always there, always showing him the way. Outside, the darkness was thick and heavy, like a warm, soft blanket pulled over everything. Sometimes, far in the distance, a tiny shimmer of light would appear. It would grow slowly, a faint promise of a town, a cluster of houses, or perhaps just a lonely gas station. But tonight, even those distant glows were few and far between. It was just him, the road, and the stars that glittered like spilled salt across the sky above. Connor gripped the steering wheel, his hands big and strong, used to holding the power of the truck. He'd seen so many nights like this, alone with his thoughts, the drone of the engine a constant companion. Sometimes he'd talk to himself, just to hear a voice. Other times he'd just let his mind wander, thinking about nothing and everything all at once. The feeling of being so small in such a big, dark world wasn't scary, not anymore. It was just familiar, a kind of quiet peace that came with being truly by yourself. Still, a hot cup of coffee would be nice. A break from the endless dark. Just as the thought of coffee warmed his mind, a splash of color broke through the inky blackness ahead. It was a neon sign, buzzing with a faint, sleepy glow. Not a town, but a roadside stop, a little island of light in a vast ocean of night. The sign flickered, making the words eat and gas dance a slow, tired jig. It looked like a friendly, old lighthouse, guiding weary travelers to shore. Connor eased his big rig off the main road, the rumble of his tires changing from a highway roar to a softer crunch on the gravel lot. He pulled into a parking spot, one of many, but his was the only truck there. The lot was almost empty, just a couple of dusty cars huddled near the diner's entrance. The quiet was sudden, like someone had turned down the volume knob on the world. The constant hum of his engine, which had been a part of him for hours, now faded to a gentle purr as he shut it off. He stretched, feeling the stiffness leave his shoulders with a soft pop. The air outside was cool and crisp, carrying the faint smell of gasoline and something sweet like old coffee. The neon sign above the diner door pulsed a soft red and blue, a beacon in the lonely night. It seemed to call to him, promising warmth and a break from the endless road. He wasn't just looking for coffee. He was looking for a moment, a pause in the long, lonely journey. A brief escape from the road's steady, unchanging song. He pushed open the heavy glass door, and a little bell jingled softly, announcing his arrival to the quiet space inside. The diner was small and cozy, smelling of old coffee and fried food. The lights inside were soft, a warm yellow that chased away the last bits of night. Connor's boots made a soft thud on the checkered floor as he walked in. The place was mostly empty, just a few tables and booths, all quiet. A tired-looking woman behind the counter nodded at him, her eyes half closed. But then Connor saw him. In a booth by the window, away from the counter, sat another person. He was a man, just sitting there, looking out at the dark. He had a quiet way about him, like a still pond. He wasn't looking at Connor, but his eyes seemed to see everything. His hair was dark, and he held a coffee cup in both hands, as if trying to warm them. His name was Evan, though Connor didn't know that yet. Evan didn't seem to be in a hurry. He just sat, watching the night. He took a slow sip of his coffee, his gaze thoughtful. Connor went to the counter, ordered his own coffee, black and strong. He felt Evan's eyes on him for a moment, a quick, silent look, and then Evan turned back to the window. There was no smile, no wave, just a quiet acknowledgement that another person had entered his peaceful space. Connor felt a strange sense of calm. It wasn't often he met someone who seemed to understand the quiet language of the night. This stranger, Evan, was like a reflection of the solitude Connor carried, sitting there, nursing his own cup of coffee, deep in his own world. Connor collected his steaming mug and looked around. The diner was small, and the only other table with someone was Evan's. He decided to sit in a booth a few tables away, giving them both space. As he settled down, his eyes met Evan's for a fleeting moment. "Night," Connor said, his voice a little rough from hours of not talking. It was a simple greeting, just a sound in the quiet room. Evan nodded slowly, his eyes still deep and thoughtful. "Night," he replied, his voice soft, almost a whisper. It was just one word, but it hung in the air, full of understanding. No need for more. Connor took a big gulp of his hot coffee. It tasted strong and bitter, exactly what he needed. He watched the steam rise from his mug, swirling into little clouds before disappearing. Evan had turned back to the window, looking out at the dark again. There was no awkwardness, no feeling that they should talk more. It was just two people alone together in the quiet diner, each with their own thoughts. The silence grew, but it wasn't empty or uncomfortable. Instead, it felt warm like an old blanket. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people understand each other without needing many words. They both knew what it was like to be awake when most of the world was asleep. They knew the long stretches of road, the quiet thoughts that filled the empty hours. The flickering neon sign outside cast soft, dancing shadows on the diner walls, adding to the gentle rhythm of the night. In this shared quiet, a strange kind of friendship began to bloom, unspoken but clear. The diner settled into a quiet hum, a soft backdrop to Connor and Evan's shared space. Outside, the neon sign continued its sleepy flicker, making a low, steady buzz that was just loud enough to notice. It was like a little heartbeat for the building, a rhythm of light and sound that spoke of late nights and lonely roads. Every few minutes, a car would speed by on the highway, its sound a quick whoosh that grew loud and then faded, like a whispered secret passing in the dark. These sounds, the neon's hum and the passing cars, mixed with the quiet clinking of Connor's spoon against his mug, creating a special kind of music. This music made the small diner feel like a world of its own, separate from everything else. The huge, dark night outside seemed far away, held back by the warm yellow glow of the diner lights and the soft, steady sounds. Inside, it was a bubble of calm, a tiny universe where only Connor, Evan, and the tired woman behind the counter existed. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, but time didn't seem to matter much here. It was a place where worries could pause, where the endless drive could be forgotten for a little while. Connor watched the small dust motes dance in the light that came through the window, making tiny swirling patterns. Evan, across the room, was still looking out, his face lit by the faint, pulsing colors of the neon sign. They were both just existing, side by side, yet each in their own quiet world. The air was thick with unspoken thoughts, and the gentle thrum of the diner held them close, a safe harbor in the middle of nowhere. The quiet stretched on, comfortable as an old sweater, but then Connor decided to break it. "Long haul tonight," he said, mostly to himself, but loud enough for Evan to hear. He took another sip of coffee, watching Evan in his peripheral vision. Evan slowly turned from the window, his eyes meeting Connor's. "They all are, aren't they?" he replied, his voice still soft, but with a hint of something more, like a question. Connor nodded. "Seems that way sometimes. Just you and the highway." He gestured vaguely towards the dark outside. "And places like this, popping up out of nowhere." Evan gave a small, almost invisible smile. "Middle of nowhere is a good place to be sometimes," he said. "Keeps things simple." He looked at his coffee cup, turning it slowly in his hands. "You drive far?" "From way up north," Connor answered, feeling the words come easier now. "Heading south. Got a delivery by morning." He leaned back in the booth, the worn plastic sighing under his weight. "You, just passing through." "Something like that," Evan said. He paused, then looked up again. "It's a strange time of night, isn't it? When everything feels different, like the world slows down just for a few hours." Connor agreed. "Yeah, like secrets come out in the dark that the day keeps hidden." He thought about the quiet hum of the diner, the neon outside, the way this little stop felt like a secret meeting place. They were two strangers, sharing coffee in the middle of nowhere, talking about the road and the night, as if they'd known each other for years. It felt natural, easy. The isolation that usually wrapped around him felt a little less heavy with Evan's quiet presence. Their talk about the night and the road led them deeper, like following a path further into the woods. Connor found himself speaking about the quiet stretches, the hundreds of miles where he wouldn't see another soul. Sometimes, he admitted, it feels like the whole world's just a blurry line outside my window, and I'm not really a part of it. He looked down at his coffee, stirring it even though it didn't need stirring, just moving through it. Evan nodded slowly, his gaze still thoughtful. I know that feeling, he said, his voice soft but clear. My path isn't on the road like yours, but it's got its own long, quiet stretches. He paused, looking out at the faint glow of the neon sign reflected in the dark window. It's like you're always on the outside looking in, even when you're in the middle of a crowd. Connor looked up, surprised by how much Evan's words felt like his own thoughts. Yeah, he said a little breathlessly. Exactly. Like there's a pane of glass between you and everyone else. He hadn't expected to share such a deep feeling with a stranger in a roadside diner. It was a feeling he usually kept locked away, a secret part of being a long-haul driver. It's the cost of some journeys, I guess, Evan murmured, taking a sip of his coffee. You gain a lot of quiet, a lot of space to think, but you lose connection. Connor felt a small knot in his chest loosen. Evan understood. Despite their different lives, the truck driver and the quiet stranger shared this deep sense of being alone, of watching the world go by from a distance. It was a powerful, unspoken bond that now filled the space between them, making the diner feel less empty. Feeling a rare comfort with Evan, Connor found himself sharing a story he rarely told. There's this one stretch of road, he began, his voice softer now, out west, through the desert. Hundreds of miles of nothing but flat land and sky. No towns, no lights, just a road. One night, a few years back, my headlights died. Just blinked out, middle of nowhere. Evan leaned forward a little, his eyes fixed on Connor, listening with every part of him. He didn't interrupt, just waited for Connor to continue. I pulled over, Connor went on, remembering the cold sweat that had run down his back. Pitch black. Couldn't see my hand in front of my face. The stars were bright, brighter than you've ever seen, but they didn't help with the road. I was stuck there for hours, waiting for the sun to come up or for someone to pass. Didn't see a single car all night. He paused, taking a breath. It was quiet, too quiet, like the world had forgotten I was there. Just me and the big dark. Evan slowly nodded, a small, knowing movement. It wasn't just a polite nod. It was a nod that said, I understand that kind of quiet. I know that feeling of being forgotten. His eyes held a deep, shared understanding, as if he too had stood in that vast, silent darkness. Finally, the sun came up. Connor finished, a faint smile touching his lips at the memory of relief. And a tow truck found me a few hours later. But that night, that was the loneliest I've ever felt, like I was the last person on earth. Evan simply met his gaze, his expression calm and full of empathy. He didn't need to say anything. The knowing nod was enough. It was a silent promise that Connor wasn't alone in feeling that way. Not anymore. After Connor finished his story, a comfortable silence returned, but it was different now, filled with the weight of shared understanding. Evan finally spoke, his gaze drifting to the faint red glow of the neon sign outside. I don't drive a truck, he began, his voice still soft, but I know that feeling of being stuck, of wanting something just out of reach. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I have a dream, Evan continued, looking at Connor. A quiet one. To build a small cabin, deep in the mountains, far from any road. A place where the only sounds are the wind and the trees. No schedules, no deadlines, just the rhythm of nature. He smiled a little, a wistful, faraway look in his eyes. It's a simple thing, really, but it feels like the hardest thing to get to sometimes. Connor listened, his own coffee growing cool in his hands. He pictured the cabin Evan described, the quiet, the peace. He understood that longing, that pull towards something simpler, something that felt truly his own. He knew the feeling of wanting to stop the endless movement to plant roots somewhere. Evan's dream wasn't about a place on a map, but a feeling of belonging, a quiet escape from the world's constant rush. It's like chasing the horizon, Connor mused, thinking of his own endless road. Always there, but always moving away. Evan nodded, a small, sad smile on his face. Exactly. And you keep driving or walking or just living, hoping one day you'll finally catch it. He took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes shining with a quiet hope. Connor felt a pang of recognition. He too had a horizon he chased, a feeling of home that was always just beyond the next mile marker. He understood Evan's quiet dream, the yearning for a life that felt truly his own, away from the lonely stretch of road. The conversation flowed easily, like a slow-moving river under the quiet stars. Connor and Evan talked about the things that filled their minds when the world was asleep. The feel of cold morning air, the way distant city lights looked like scattered jewels, the hope that kept them going. The clock on the diner wall, with its big, slow hands, seemed to get stuck. Minutes stretched into long, comfortable moments. Hours felt like gentle blinks of an eye. Neither man looked at their watches. Neither man felt a pull to leave. Connor had a schedule, a delivery to make, but it felt far away, like a whisper from another world. The hum of the neon sign outside, the faint whoosh of a car passing on the highway, all these sounds blended into a soft, sleepy melody that made the diner feel outside of time. This feeling, this unexpected comfort with a stranger, was new to Connor. He spent so much of his life alone, the only company being his own thoughts. To find someone who understood the quiet parts of him, the parts that yearned for something more than just the next mile, was a rare and precious gift. Evan felt it too. His eyes, usually so watchful, now held a soft, relaxed look. He leaned back in his booth, completely at ease, as if he had found exactly where he was meant to be. It was more than just talking. It was a sharing of souls. Two lonely men, brought together by chance in a forgotten diner, finding a connection that warmed them more than the hot coffee ever could. They weren't in a hurry to leave this special place, this small world they had made together, even if only for a little while. The night was still deep, and they had nowhere else they truly needed to be. Connor reached for his coffee mug again, his fingers brushing against the cold ceramic. He'd forgotten about it, lost in the easy flow of words with Evan. The hot steam that had once curled invitingly from the rim was long gone. Evan's cup, too, sat untouched, a silent testament to how little the actual coffee mattered now. What truly warmed them wasn't the bitter brew, but the unexpected comfort they found in each other's company. The small diner felt full, not with people, but with a feeling of connection. Their shared stories, their quiet understandings, had woven a warm blanket around them. Outside, the vast, dark world still stretched on, cold and empty. But inside this little island of light, that emptiness felt pushed back, held at bay by the glow of the neon sign and the quiet strength of their conversation. Connor looked at Evan, who was now smiling faintly as he spoke of a faraway mountain trail he once walked. The lines around Evan's eyes crinkled softly, making him seem less like a stranger and more like an old friend. Connor realized how rare this was, to feel so seen and understood by someone he had just met. The isolation that often clung to him, a silent passenger on his long drives, felt lighter now, almost gone. The diner, with its worn tables and sleepy counter attendant, had become a special place. It wasn't just a stop for gas and coffee. It was a sanctuary, a moment where two souls found each other in the vastness of the night. The cold coffee didn't matter. The warmth they felt came from a deeper place, a connection that kept the dark at bay. As the night deepened, a quiet understanding bloomed between Connor and Evan. It wasn't just that they had talked about loneliness or dreams. It was the way they listened, the way their eyes met and held a knowing look. Connor felt Evan truly saw him, not just as a truck driver passing through, but as a man carrying his own stories and silent hopes. And Connor saw the same in Evan, a quiet strength, a gentle spirit, and a deep longing for something more. They spoke of the small worries that sat heavy on their hearts, the kind you don't share with just anyone. Connor mentioned the pressure of deadlines, the worry of a breakdown far from help, the feeling of missing family even when they were far away. Evan, in turn, spoke of the struggle to make his dream cabin a reality, the doubts that crept in when he was alone, and the fear of never truly finding his place. But beneath these shared burdens, there was also a glimmer of hope, a secret light they both held on to. For Connor, it was the thought of finally saving enough money to buy his own small patch of land, a place where his truck could rest for good. For Evan, it was the image of that mountain cabin, a peaceful haven that kept him moving forward. They didn't say these hopes out loud in big, grand words, but they were there, shining in their eyes, acknowledged in the soft nods they gave each other. It was a powerful thing, this silent understanding. It was a promise that even in the middle of nowhere, in the deepest part of the night, two strangers could find a shared space for their quiet battles and their brightest dreams. The diner wasn't just pushing back the dark. It was holding a secret, a quiet acknowledgement of human spirit in the face of a lonely world. The world outside began to change. A faint, soft gray crept into the blackness, painting the very edge of the sky. Then, thin lines of pink and orange appeared, like a sleepy artist brushing gentle colors onto a dark canvas. The neon sign above the diner, which had buzzed so bravely all night, seemed to dim, its glow less important against the growing light. Dawn was coming, quiet and beautiful. Connor looked out the window, then at Evan. The light of the rising sun caught Evan's face, making his eyes seem even deeper. The tired woman behind the counter stretched, yawning, and turned on the brighter overhead lights, making the diner feel a little less magical. The spell of the deep night was slowly breaking. "Looks like the sun's ready to take over," Connor said, his voice a little softer than before. Evan nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "It always does," he replied. He turned to face Connor fully, and in his eyes, Connor saw a clear understanding. It was a shared knowing, a silent agreement that this wasn't just any night. Something special had happened here, in this forgotten little diner, in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't a big event, no loud noises or grand gestures. It was a quiet unfolding, a gentle meeting of souls. They had come as strangers, alone in their own worlds, and now they were leaving with a piece of each other's journey. This simple stop, meant for a quick coffee and a break from the road, had become much more. It was a marker, a moment in time where loneliness had met understanding, and hope had found a quiet echo. They both felt it, a warm glow spreading through them as the soft colors of dawn filled the sky. With the new light of dawn filling the diner, Connor stood up from his booth. He felt a quiet sadness that the night and their conversation was coming to an end. Evan stood too, his movements slow and thoughtful. They walked towards each other, meeting in the middle of the empty diner, near the counter. "Well," Connor said, a little unsure how to say goodbye to someone he felt he had known for a long, long time, even though it had only been a few hours. Evan offered a small, gentle smile. He held out his hand. "Good to meet you, Connor," he said, his voice carrying the same calm warmth it had all night. Connor took Evan's hand. It was a firm grip, warm and steady. In that simple handshake, there was more than just a greeting. It was a silent promise, a quiet pact between two men. It promised to remember the words shared, the loneliness understood, and the dreams whispered in the dark. It was a promise to carry the feeling of this unexpected connection, a special light found in a forgotten place. Their hands parted, but the feeling of the handshake lingered for Connor. He looked into Evan's eyes one last time, seeing not a stranger, but someone who understood the quiet corners of his heart. Evan's gaze held the same deep understanding. There was no need for phone numbers or plans to meet again. This moment, this night was enough. It was a gift, complete in itself. They both knew it would stay with them, a warm ember from the quiet fire they had built in the middle of nowhere. With a final nod to Evan, Connor turned and walked out of the diner. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and a hint of promise. The neon sign, now a weak glow against the brightening sky, didn't buzz as loudly. Connor looked back for a moment. Evan was still standing inside, a quiet figure in the window, watching him go. Connor climbed into the big cab of his truck. The engine grumbled to life, a familiar rumble, but this time it sounded different. Not just a lonely companion, but a powerful friend ready to carry him forward. He pulled out of the parking lot, the gravel crunching under his tires, and headed back onto the highway. The road ahead still stretched out, long and endless, but it didn't feel as vast or as empty as it had before. The rising sun painted the sky in soft oranges and purples, chasing away the last shadows of the night. Connor gripped the steering wheel, a faint smile on his face. He carried the memory of Evan, of their shared stories, and the quiet understanding that had bloomed between them. It was like a warm ember in his chest, a little light that made the world feel a little less cold. He knew he might never see Evan again. They were just two ships passing in the night, stopping for a moment in a little harbor. But that moment had changed something. The loneliness that had been a constant hum in his life now seemed softer, quieter. He had found a connection, a reminder that even in the middle of nowhere, important things can happen. The miles ahead were still many, but Connor felt lighter, ready for the journey, carrying a new kind of warmth in his heart.